So the first one is Adam Fourney's work that he's been doing as a PhD student with me. And we're going to show you how you can use Google Suggest to quickly figure out what your users are doing with your software. This is really cool technology. Later in the day, we're going to show a new version of GIMP we've created called Adaptable GIMP. So stick around for that. I think you'll enjoy that as well. In both of these talks, I encourage you to interrupt us during the talk and ask questions. Because you'll get the most out of the talk if you actually stop us and say, hey, wait, what about this, what about that, what about that, right? So don't wait till the end. So I'm going to turn it over to Adam now, but again, please interrupt.
All right, so as Mike already said, this is about understanding how people are using your software based on looking at what search queries they perform. And it's based on the observation that when people run into trouble with software, with interactive systems or devices, first line of defense is often Google. All right, so let's start with a quick motivating example. All right, so is it getting me now?
Yeah, maybe put it on the right side here.
All right, let's try that. Okay, it sounds better. All right, so here's a quick example. So back in September, I went to Google and I typed in Firefox how-to. And immediately, of course, Google returns a list of 10 suggestions for how I should complete this query. And the important thing is that these queries are actual queries that other people have performed in the past, and they're sorted approximately according to their popularity. Just looking at this list, we get a pretty good idea right away of some of the common activities that Firefox users engage in. And so there's an interest in privacy, clearing the cache, deleting cookies, that kind of a thing. But if we go further down the list here, I've highlighted this one. It's a little bit curious. Right? Firefox, how to get the menu bar back. All right, so we can actually inspect the interface of Firefox to try to figure out why this is so popular. All right, so this is Firefox 3.6. Again, I did this in September, so Firefox 4 it was still in beta. Firefox 3.6 on Windows XP. I'm happy to report that this is a problem that's only on Windows. But if you go to View Toolbars and you uncheck the menu bar, well, the menu bar disappears. The problem with this is that the menu bar is now gone, and that was how I actually accessed those options to begin with. So the first time I did this, I actually had no idea how to undo that action. I had no idea how to recover from the situation. And it turns out that I'm not alone, as you might have already suspected. If you exhaustively look through Google Suggest, here are a whole ton of different search suggestions, all related to this missing menu bar. Using the techniques that we're going to talk about later, we've identified over 150 different suggestions in Google Suggest about this issue. And we estimate that a search from the set is actually performed about once every 32 minutes on average. So what I think this example demonstrates, and it should really appeal to your intuition, is that search query logs are these central repositories that catalog the day-to-day needs of a user community. And I'm actually going to step back a little bit and look at this in sort of a broader context. So there's actually been some research done at Microsoft Research looking at how to use query logs to do things like medical research and social science research. And a researcher named Matthew Richardson, he has this quote, which I really like. So the query logs act as if a survey were sent to millions of people, asking them every day to write down what they were interested in, thinking about, planning, and doing. So this is very rich data, and it's highly ecologically valid. So to demonstrate that, actually, some of you may have come across this in the past, but Google actually produced an application called the Google Flu Trends, where they look at health-seeking behavior, so searches related to flu symptoms or that kind of a thing, to try to predict when somebody would go to the doctor and be diagnosed with the flu. Now, the important thing is that their model actually is very close to the data that was released by the CDC, but they were able to produce these numbers in 24 hours, whereas the CDC had a 7-day lag because they had to wait for the doctors to report all these cases. So it's a very, very powerful technique. Now, taking this a bit closer to what we do, I looked at the Google Insight for Ubuntu, and I think we can see a 6-month release cycle here. So it's actually a pretty neat data source. All right, so the claim here is that query logs can reveal the tasks and the issues for any publicly available interactive system. So I stress here that it has to be publicly available because people have to be performing searches. And you get better results when you have a larger community, a larger user base. But the problem that we have is that we don't have access to Google's query log data set. So the question is, how can we approximate this data? And I think you guys already know the answer. But just to reiterate, so here's the example from the beginning again. But if I add one letter to it, now I get another 10 suggestions. I can just sort of do a breadth first search here and get more suggestions. And in total, there's about 74, 75,000 distinct suggestions if we do this. Actually, I'm going to just do this live just to give you a sense of how easy this is to do. All right, so this is... And you get the idea that you can sort of see the common questions very quickly. And some people don't know this. I think it's kind of cool. You can actually move the caret back, and it will actually fill like in random places. So you can actually really quickly go through and enumerate these things. All right. I think we have to get back to a spot here. All right, so I actually did that for a bunch of projects. Some of them are listed here. So you can see that, you know, between, in many cases, thousands, or in some cases, hundreds of thousands of suggestions are returned. I have, for Blender here, an asterisk here, just a caveat that when project has a common name, you end up having to disambiguate between Blender, the project, and Blenders for ICE and things like that. But you can actually filter that out pretty well just by actually performing the searches and seeing what pages come back, and then you can kind of determine from the language of the pages whether or not it's relevant to a particular topic. Okay. So now I talked about, for example, with GIMP we have about 15,000 suggestions. Those are the suggestions, but they actually represent about 2.8 million search queries. There's actually more queries than that, but the thing is that Google, to preserve people's privacy, they do this sort of k-anonymization, so they cut off the long tail. So only searches that are performed by many users are actually recorded in this data set. So we've got data very, very quickly representing about 2.8 million searches, and that's kind of typical for this type of thing. And of course, the popularity of the searches, it falls off sort of exponentially. So the popular stuff is really popular, and then it has a sort of long tail distribution at the end. All right, so I'm just going to give a couple of examples very briefly. So this one here I like quite a bit. It's called, I like to refer it to Speak the User's Language. And again, I adapted this presentation from a presentation I did earlier in the week. So I mean, this is probably pretty obvious to you guys, but in the GIMP dataset, we actually see a lot of searches for people asking, how do I convert an image to black and white? And here they're not talking about a binary image in most cases. They're actually, they want something that looks like it was an image captured on black and white film. And there's many ways of doing this in the GIMP. You know, you can use a grayscale, desaturate, channel mixer command, that kind of thing. But the problem is that none of these commands use the words black or white, and that's what people are searching for. So at least it sort of suggests that to some percentage of the audience, maybe they're not able to recognize that these commands are necessarily relevant. So we actually identified over 90 different distinct phrasings for the question, you know, how do I convert to black and white? And on average, it's searched about once every 74 minutes. There is a question, yes.
Maybe you're going to address that in further on in the presentation, but maybe in that case, it's just a random idea. Have you thought about having, instead of just a set of static menus, having a searchable set of menus?
Yes, in fact, this factors quite prominently into our research. It's something that I'm working on currently. I can show a little bit about that at the end of the presentation, but actually my colleague Ben up there is going to show the Apple GIMP this afternoon, and search plays a big role there as well. Right? And I think that's a good point. I mean, you can't find one vocabulary that's going to fit everybody. What you want to do is have sort of these aliases where, depending on your background, you can come in and still find what's relevant to perform your task. So another example here, this time Inkscape. So a lot of people asking how to crop. They're not thinking about fitting the page to the selection or these other types of things. And here we can see that these types of searches are performed about once every 3 hours. It's a slightly less search volume. And we can look at another example here. So I make the claim that in GIMP, to draw primitive shapes, it's typically a multi-step process. If you want to draw an outline circle, for instance, you use ellipse select, you use stroke selection. And as a result, we see many, many, many searches for people asking, how do I draw a circle? It's searched about once per hour, and that's not the only primitive shape people are looking for. We see like 130 different ways of asking, how do I draw various types of lines, in particular straight lines, 40 different suggestions for rectangles, 20 for squares, 14 for ellipses. So it's just, this data suggests that maybe a multi-step process is eluding some portion of the audience for the software, people who are actually using it day to day.